Now my deep, deep honor to introduce to you the honorary chair of the Alliance, the senior senator from New Hampshire, Jeanne Shaheen. Senator Shaheen is a lady of many firsts. She is the first woman in this country to serve both as a governor and a senator, and the only one to do that. She also was the first female chair of the Alliance to Save Energy, and as you saw earlier this morning, she cycled back into that leadership role, and I just couldn't be happier about that. Senator Shaheen is somebody who comes to this with a personal passion. She practiced energy efficiency in her personal life before she began preaching it as a policymaker. The senator and her husband set out to build their first home in the 1970s, which I think they still live in today, to be as energy efficient as possible. And I think that her experience was not like Commissioner LaFleur's with her refrigerator, thankfully. She found energy efficiency to be a good thing. She learned the value of energy efficiency firsthand and then applied that in her state. During her tenure as governor of New Hampshire, she put in place policies and programs that resulted in saving her constituents $1 billion. And as those of you who follow U.S. energy policy know, Senator Shaheen has become the first lady of energy efficiency in the Congress, having worked tirelessly since coming here to secure passage of public policy that can underpin the rapid and the widespread deployment of energy efficiency. Her hard work is beginning to pay off, as Ralph Cavanagh said. Just last week, I was privileged to watch and witness, as did Senator Shaheen, the signing of the first bipartisan energy bill that's been enacted into law in all 6 years of Obama's administration. And the bill that was authored by Senators Shaheen and Portman was the Energy Efficiency Improvement Act of 2015. During the signing ceremony, the president turned around, and you can see all the smiles on the faces, and urged this bipartisan group of policymakers to bring him many more efficiency bills before he leaves office. And Senator Shaheen is just the lady to do that. She's got some unfinished business she'll probably talk about with her Portman-Shaheen energy efficiency bill, as well as a lot of new innovative policy proposals that she is putting forward. So please join me in welcoming today the First Lady of Energy Efficiency, Jeanne Shaheen.
Thank you very much, Kateri. I like that, the First Lady of Energy Efficiency. That's good. Reporters in the room, write that down. So use that again. It's very nice to be with all of you this morning, although I hesitate a little bit because I think I'm the only thing standing between you and the breakout sessions and lunch. So it's always challenging to be in this position. And I will assure you, before I go into my remarks, that I'm going to do exactly what Ralph told you I'm not going to do, and that is I'm going to ask you for your help in getting legislation done, because you're the reason things move in Congress. I'm a big believer that democracy only works when people get engaged, and your engagement is very important. So as Kateri said, I got involved in energy efficiency personally because my husband and I built our home in Madbury, New Hampshire in 1979 in the middle of the Iranian oil crisis, and we could get tax credits to be more efficient in our building. And so I saw firsthand some of the benefits. Some of the things worked, some didn't work. We put on solar panels to heat our hot water. Those didn't work. So we're going to have to try it again. But that experience showed me what can be done through efficiency. And I think it's important for us to recognize, and Commissioner LaFleur talked about not making this about energy efficiency and nothing else. I'm not in that category. I think we need a robust energy policy that recognizes we need to support sort of an across-the-board approach. We need renewables. We are still dependent on fossil fuels and probably will be for some time. But we need efficiency, and the reason efficiency is so important is because it's a place where we can all agree. Regardless of whether you support renewables or fossil fuels, everybody benefits from efficiency, and that's been one of the things that I have learned as the result of my personal experiences. And I think it's important. The panel was talking about the fact that people don't think about efficiency as being a source of energy. You know, it's not as it's not as exciting as renewables. It's not as controversial as fossil fuels. And so it sort of gets lost in the debate. But it's important to remember exactly the benefits of efficiency. So without energy efficiencies developed since 1973 in the United States, our economy would have used 60% more energy. Those efficiencies also saved our economy $700 billion. Now, my favorite stat about efficiency is that in the last 40 years in America, we have saved more energy through efficiency than we have produced through fossil fuels and nuclear power combined. So all you have to do is to look at the statistics to say, this is an energy source. And we need to repeat that. Those of us who appreciate energy efficiency need to keep repeating that. You know, at some point in my political career, I heard from a much more experienced politician who said to me, when you're talking and you've said something so much that you feel like you want to throw up, that's when people are finally getting it. I'm glad somebody's paying attention here. And I think there's truth in that. And so for those of us who appreciate the benefits of efficiency, the potential for efficiency, we need to keep repeating it, repeating it, repeating it. Because only if we do that are people going to get it. So Kateri talked a little bit about, and you saw the picture of us with President Obama signing the first energy bill in this Congress, the first energy efficiency legislation that I've had the opportunity to get passed. And it was exciting because it was a first, but it was exciting because it also went according to plan. Now, this may surprise you, but I'm always excited when things in Congress go according to plan. So Senator Portman and I, who have been working on energy efficiency, wanted to get this very small bill done that was important to the rural electric co-ops. Do we have any rural co-ops represented in the room today? Raise your hands. Well, they use grid-enabled water heaters, so large water heaters, and they had a deadline for when regulations were going to kick in that were going to mean that they could not use those water heaters in the same way. And so we said, well, if we're going to move that, let's see if we can get some other efficiency provisions on. And the House passed legislation last session that included several other provisions, something called Tenant Star, which is like the Energy Star program, only it applies to tenants so they can work with their landlords on energy efficiencies. And it provided for benchmarking in federally leased buildings. So right now we have a requirement that federal buildings have to keep track of their energy use, but we didn't until this legislation passed have a requirement to do that in buildings that the federal government leased. So small provisions, but significant in terms of savings. And Senator Portman and I said, well, you know, we ought to be able to get this done. This would be a good signal that efficiency is something that we can move. And so we amended the legislation onto the Keystone Pipeline bill, something that was quite controversial, as I'm sure you all followed, something that helped kill Shaheen Portman in the last Congress. So we amended it onto the bill. We knew that the president was going to veto that bill. We said, well, that'll get it through the Senate, so we don't have to go to a hearing. The House had already passed it. And so we ought to be able to then move it back through the Senate by unanimous consent, by voice vote, without having to get bogged down in other things. And in fact, that is exactly what happened. Senator Portman and I have learned that when it comes to efficiency, the last person standing is the person who often is successful. And so when he and I were on the floor of the Senate until 4:30, the night we did the budget, or the morning we did the budget, and we were able to get the bill through by a voice vote. It then passed the House by unanimous consent, and the president signed it. And I give you that background because I think it's important for us as we're thinking about how do we move legislation to have a plan and a strategy to do that. And as any of you who have been here before know, and I know that we have a lot of Alliance members here, so I very much appreciate all of your support for the Energy Savings and Industrial Competitiveness Act, which is the official name of the broader, what in the last two Congresses we called Shaheen-Portman when Democrats were in the majority. Now that Republicans are in the majority, we're calling it Portman-Shaheen. So anything to get an advantage, you know, a strategy, we need a strategy. But as you all know, that is legislation that would be a big chunk of efficiency that would set a comprehensive policy at the national level to address efficiency. And it deals with buildings, where we use about 40% of our energy. And for me, as someone who represents the state of New Hampshire, where our buildings are older than the stock is nationally, where we are at the end of the energy pipeline, saving energy use in buildings is absolutely critical. So it provides incentives for upgraded building codes, and I think it's important to say incentives, not mandates. There are no mandates in this legislation. There is very little new spending, and it's all offset. The legislation also includes industrial efficiency, because the manufacturing sector uses more energy than any other sector of our economy. And then it deals with the federal government, again, requiring the federal government, the single largest user of energy, to do a better job in being efficient. If it were to pass today and be fully implemented, the Portman-Shaheen legislation would cut carbon emissions by the equivalent of taking 22 million cars off the road. It would save consumers over $16 billion a year and would help create about 200,000 jobs. So it's a win-win-win.